When the galaxy's most ruthless empire invaded Earth, we didn't send an army to meet them, we sent a book of laws. They laughed and threw our rules on the floor, thinking it was a plea for mercy. They didn't realize those rules weren't written to protect us from them. They were built to keep us from becoming monsters. Part 1. The document no one took seriously. The Vorrkai Empire had been spacefaring for 6,000 years. They had conquered 41 worlds, absorbed 17 civilizations, destroyed 11, and brought the remaining 13 to heel through overwhelming force followed by a reasonable taxation structure. They were, by every galactic metric, a dominant power, ancient, vast, and possessed of the particular arrogance that accumulates in a species that has been winning for so long it has forgotten that winning is not a permanent state of nature. When their long-range survey drones identified the third planet of a small yellow star in an unremarkable outer arm system, the initial assessment was brief. Single inhabited world. One sapient species. Early spaceflight stage, limited to their own solar system. Significant internal divisions. No unified military command structure. Estimated resistance coefficient, minimal. Recommended action, standard annexation protocol. The Vorrkai High Throne reviewed the assessment for approximately 4 minutes before authorizing the expedition. Nobody consulted the humans. This was considered unnecessary. The Vorrkai annexation fleet entered the Sol system on a Thursday. It was an impressive fleet, 47 capital ships and 230 support vessels, carrying a ground force sufficient to pacify a world 3 times Earth's size. Admiral Vethsar, commanding, had conducted 8 successful annexations in his career and approached the 9th with the calm professionalism of a being doing familiar work. The humans detected the fleet at the edge of the solar system. They had approximately 72 hours. What happened in those 72 hours surprised Admiral Vethsar. Not the defensive preparations, he had expected those. Not the emergency transmissions to the wider galaxy. What surprised him was the delegation. A single human vessel, small, unarmed, broadcasting the universal diplomatic frequency, approached the flagship at hour 48. Vethsar permitted 3 humans to come aboard. They were bipedal, soft-skinned, wearing formal attire. The leader was a middle-aged woman with the steady eyes of someone who has looked at difficult things and not looked away. She introduced herself as Ambassador Chenwei, speaking for all of Earth. She placed a document bound in dark material on the conference table. Its title embossed on the cover read, Consolidated Terran Conduct of War Accords and Associated Humanitarian Conventions.
This document,
Ambassador Chen said,
represents 230 years of human legal and military framework governing the conduct of armed conflict. It details the constraints that the Terran military places upon itself and the standards we ask of any opposing force. We present it not as a request, but as a declaration of the framework within which we are prepared to engage. We ask that you take it seriously.
Vethsar looked at the document. He had received pleas, offers of tribute, and declarations of defiance before. He had never received a rulebook. He looked at Admiral Commander Drex, standing at his right hand, who was trying very hard not to laugh. Vethsar picked up the dark book and dropped it off the edge of the table. It hit the floor with a flat, final sound.
You have 24 hours to begin formal surrender proceedings.
Vethsar said.
After which, standard annexation protocol commences. You may go.
Ambassador Chen looked at the document on the floor. Her expression was not fear or desperation. It was the profound, tragic sadness of someone who had hoped very much that something would go differently, and had just confirmed that it would not.
I see,
she said quietly. She bent down, picked up the document, and held it to her chest.
I'm sorry,
she whispered. Not to him, to the universe. She left. Vethsar watched her vessel turn back toward the blue planet and made a standard note in his operational log. He had a fleet to position. He did not think about her face. Part 2. What the galaxy was watching. On 47 worlds across 6 sectors, beings watched. The Vorrkai Empire's expansions were always observed. The galaxy had learned to pay attention to see who was being absorbed and what they had been. The Marith Collective's senior intelligence analyst, Selorith, had been monitoring human civilization for 11 years. She did not expect the humans to win. She expected them to fight. Human history was unambiguous on that. Humans fought the way some species breathe, reflexively, without consideration of cost. But 47 Vorrkai capital ships against a species that had not yet left their own solar system was not a military contest. It was a geological event. You watched it simply to see how the landscape changed. The Vorrkai fleet entered combat range at hour 73. The humans had not surrendered. Vethsar did not use his standard demonstration protocol. He did not use it because the humans did not give him time. The moment the Vorrkai fleet crossed the threshold of human weapon ranges, the human response force launched everything simultaneously. They didn't fire warning shots. They didn't post bastions. They unleashed a synchronized saturation wave of kinetic and nuclear payloads. The opening engagement lasted 11 minutes and cost Vethsar 3 capital ships. He stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3 ships shattered in minutes by a species that wasn't supposed to be able to scratch Vorrkai armor. He revised his assessment upward and ordered the full engagement, launching the ground invasion on day 3. Part 3. The absence of cruelty. What happened in the first week is documented in the Vorrkai operational logs with the unraveling composure of military minds facing an existential horror. By day 4, the Vorrkai ground forces realized they were not fighting a military. They were fighting an environment that had turned predatory. The humans did not construct traditional front lines. When the Vorrkai deployed their standard sensor nets, the displays read clear, until the ground literally opened beneath them. The humans had dug thousands of miles of subterranean assault tunnels within 72 hours, using heavy industrial boring equipment pushed far past its engineering limits. Humanity did not fight for territory. They fought for maximum physical and psychological attrition. They weaponized their entire civilization. Vorrkai supply convoys were not hit by plasma fire, but by civilian vehicles packed with crude, unstable mining explosives that disintegrated armored plating through sheer concussive mass. Agricultural drones were rewired into automated night stalkers, dropping white phosphorus, a substance humans had banned among themselves for centuries, onto Vorrkai staging areas. True human brutality, the Vorrkai discovered, was not born of anger. It was born of cold, terrifyingly efficient mathematics. When a Vorrkai division attempted to use a major human population center as a tactical buffer, a standard doctrine across the galaxy to force a surrender, they found the city entirely empty. The humans had evacuated millions of citizens in total silence hours before. In their place, they had rigged the city's entire infrastructure. When the Vorrkai advance units occupied the skyscrapers, the humans didn't offer terms. They detonated the foundations of 40 city blocks simultaneously. The buildings didn't just collapse, they were engineered to fall inward, creating a massive, grinding concrete tomb that crushed 30,000 Vorrkai soldiers in less than 90 seconds. There was no communication from the human commanders. No demands. Just the silent, bureaucratic erasure of an entire army corps. On day 6, Admiral Commander Drex was killed. He was not killed in a glorious firefight. He was assassinated inside a heavily fortified, biologically sealed command bunker. A human infiltration team had introduced a weaponized, fast-acting necrotizing pathogen into the bunker's isolated water supply. It was a bioweapon humanity had sequenced, tested, and stored in deep vaults centuries ago, locked away under the Accords. Without the Accords, they manufactured it in makeshift labs within 48 hours. Drex and his entire staff dissolved from the inside out over the course of 6 agonizing hours, their skin sloughing off while their automated distress beacons broadcasted their screams to the entire fleet. By day 7, Vethsar's logs grew sparse.
When we entered this system, I had 47 capital ships. I have 41. I do not know our current ground complement because the humans have systematically hunted our communications officers, leaving their severed biometric pieces on our automated patrol routes. Additional force will not resolve this. The High Throne does not understand what we have unleashed. I am not sure I do either.
Part 4. Removing the leash. At the Dresh Collective's elite military academy, Admiral Scholar Povtaith paused his graduate seminar to force his students to analyze the unfolding horror.
Look at the tactical feeds.
Povtaith ordered, pointing to a flickering screen.
A Vorrkai heavy armored column, completely intact on the previous orbital scan. Now, it is vapor and molten slag. Explain how an early-stage species achieved this without orbital supremacy.
The students sat in stunned silence. Finally, a young Veth analyst named Exasecondary spoke up.
They didn't use orbital weapons, Admiral. They overloaded the continental power grid. They routed 3 gigawatts of raw electrical energy through the regional transit rails the Vorrkai column was crossing. They literally cooked the soldiers inside their suits using their own armor as a conductor.
Povtaith nodded grimly.
And why did they resort to such a catastrophic, environmentally devastating tactic?
Because of the document.
Exe Secondary whispered, pulling up the translation of the Consolidated Terran Conduct of War Accords.
I have been reading the translation. Page 814, Article 9. The targeted destruction of civilian power grids and the use of uninsulated ambient electrical warfare is strictly prohibited due to long-term ecological fallout. The humans didn't invent these nightmares yesterday, Admiral. They already had them. They had spent hundreds of years building a cage to keep these instincts locked away.
Exactly.
Povtaith said, his voice cold.
The document was never a plea for mercy. It was a structural blueprint of the leash humans use to keep themselves from becoming monsters. They handed it to the Vorrkai to say, "Look at what we are capable of when we lose our minds. Help us keep this leash on." And the Vorrkai threw on the floor.
Part 5. The Mechanics of Total War. From the operational log of Admiral Vethsar, Day 11.
I have been in the Imperial Navy for 40 years, and I am filing a report that contains the word incomprehensible. Our ground forces in the Eastern Theater have not been destroyed, they have been strategically engineered into a nightmare. The humans are using targeted microwave radiation to boil the sensory organs of our frontline troops, leaving them alive but permanently blinded, maddened, and screaming. They are deliberately keeping them alive because a dead soldier requires no logistics, but 10,000 maimed, weeping soldiers break our medical capacity and paralyze our advance. It is a calculated, horrific optimization of trauma.
Humanity's ruthlessness was completely decentralized. When Vorrkai electronic warfare severed the human chain of command, the humans didn't panic. Instead, they entered a state their tactical AIs called distributed tactical cognition. Without orders, every individual human combatant began operating on a singular, brutal premise: make the cost of remaining on Earth unabsorbable by any means necessary. Small squads engineered localized dust storms using industrial terraforming chemicals, choking the Vorrkai intake engines and tearing the lungs of the soldiers open with aerosolized silicates. On Day 12, the Vorrkai lost the capital ship Throne's Will. The humans didn't use a missile. They had found an unmapped 3-kilometer-wide iron asteroid in the asteroid belt, strapped jury-rigged commercial fusion drives to its flank, and calculated an unpowered, silent ballistic trajectory. It drifted through the void for 12 days, masked as space debris, until it collided with the Throne's Will at 40 kilometers per second. The impact didn't just destroy the ship. The kinetic energy sheared the vessel in half and sent the radioactive fragments screaming into the atmosphere of the planet, entirely sacrificing a human subcontinent's climate just to obliterate a Vorrkai fleet element. Vethsar spent his nights reading the partial translation of Part 12 of the Accords, the suspension protocol. It stated that if an enemy combatant refused to recognize the legal framework of warfare, the Terran military was authorized to suspend all moral and ethical restraints, legalizing the use of absolute kinetic desolation, psychological erasure, and total planetary denial.
I am reviewing our operational record.
Vethsar wrote, his hands shaking.
I am trying to determine when they turned off the rules. I think they did it before the first shot was fired. I think they did it when I dropped the document on the floor.
Part 6, The Turning. By Day 17, the Vorrkai High Throne convened an emergency session. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Empire authorized an commander to request a negotiated withdrawal. Before the session, Vethsar's exhausted aide, Kothvel, collapsed into a chair in the Admiral's quarters.
Sir,
Kothvel stammered, his eyes wide with a strange, hollow shock.
the Eastern Theater units, the blinded ones, the ones pinned in the radioactive valleys, the humans that it just stopped, they pulled back their drone swarms. They laid down physical guidelines, left crates of medical supplies and clean water, and walked away into the ruins. They let them go.
Vethsar stared out the viewport at the scarred, blackened surface of Earth. He opened his translated datapad to Part 8, Treatment of Enemy Combatants Rendered Non-Combat Effective. It detailed the mandatory care, dignity, and preservation of life for a defeated foe.
They didn't release them out of weakness, Koth.
Vethsar whispered, his voice trembling.
They release them because they are trying desperately to remember how to be human. They have spent 17 days living in the blackest depths of their ancestral souls, and they are terrified of what they see in the mirror. They are letting our men go because the alternative is that they forget how to stop.
Part 7. The Choice to Close the Door. On day 19, Ambassador Chen Wei came aboard the flagship alone. She sat across the table from Vethsar, looking at the exact spot where the first book had been discarded.
We are prepared to discuss withdrawal terms.
Vethsar said immediately, his voice devoid of pride.
I know.
Chen replied quietly.
Did anyone read it?
Vethsar asked, his voice hollow.
Before the fleet arrived. Did anyone actually look at what you brought?
No.
She said.
I read it afterward.
Vethsar said.
I understood that the document was not about what you would do to us. It was about what you would not do. The prohibited actions, the bioweapons, the kinetic drops, the horrific optimizations of suffering, those are things you are fully capable of.
Yes.
Chen said, her eyes fixed on his.
We are a terrifyingly efficient apex predator, Admiral. We spent 10,000 years slaughtering each other over borders, religion, and pride. We are so good at war that our weapons outpaced our morality before we even figured out how to cure our own cancers. The Accords exist because we know exactly what we are. We are not better than you. But we have spent 2 centuries writing down the rules that keep our savagery from erasing us from existence.
She reached into her case and placed a fresh, identical copy of the document on the table.
The withdrawal terms are in Appendix C.
She said.
They are fair, structured, and completely non-punitive. We do not want to leave a wound that festers. We want to put the rules back on.
You want to put the rules back on?
Vethsar repeated.
We always want to put them back on.
Chen said, her voice cracking slightly with a deeply suppressed emotional weight.
We hate who we have been for the last 19 days. There are people on our outer colonies who lost everything to your advanced scouts before you ever got here. We couldn't ask them to hold back when you showed them that laws meant nothing to you. But we're done now. Read the whole document this time, so that the next time a human puts this on a table, whoever is sitting across from them understands exactly what they are holding.
Part 8. What the Galaxy Learned. The war ended on day 23. The Vorrkai fleet withdrew under the strict, orderly terms of Appendix C. The human forces let them leave without firing a single parting shot, an act of sudden, absolute discipline that left galactic observers breathless. Selorith filed her final assessment to the Marith Collective that evening.
The human species is not a war-loving civilization.
She wrote.
They plant things, they make art, they love their children with an intensity that borders on the extreme. They do not love war. They are simply, terrifyingly, the absolute masters of it. The Consolidated Terran Conduct of War Accords is not a list of things humans cannot do. It is a catalogue of horrors they have consciously chosen to deny themselves. The distinction is everything. They possess a capability for devastation that has no visible ceiling, yet they choose to bind themselves to lines in the dirt. The Vorrkai Empire threw that document on the floor. There is a concept in the human legal tongue called invitation. You do not unclip the muzzle from a monster and then act surprised when it tears your throat out. Humanity is not a threat to the galaxy because it wants to conquer us. Humanity is a threat because it is trying very hard not to be one, and the document is the only thing standing between us and their primitive, unbridled wrath. Throwing it on the floor is the most dangerous thing any civilization can do.
In the years that followed, the document found its way onto every major diplomatic desk in the galaxy. It was translated into hundreds of languages, studied in every military academy, and held as a sacred text of galactic stability. 14 months after the war, the Vorrkai High Throne formally requested a permanent copy. Ambassador Chen Wei printed 200 copies and sent them to the High Throne with a brief, chilling cover letter.
Please read all of it. Please read Part 12 especially. We are glad this is where we are instead of where we were. We hope it is useful.
She went back to work, because the ships, the weapons, and the horrific capability for violence would always be there, resting just beneath the skin of every human being. The weapons weren't the triumph of their civilization. The rules were, and every single day, When the door to that ancient, bloody darkness sat unlocked, humanity looked into the abyss and chose to keep the door closed.